I think the the justice system in BC is broken. So I'd like to make a few suggestions on on things that could be considered to make it work better. At the present time, there's inordinate delays. It's almost unbelievable it would take as long as it does to get a court case through the system and a resolution made. The riots after the Grey Cup or the Stanley Cup game a few years back are still really being processed, and there's a number of other examples that just seem to be unbelievable how much time can elapse. One of the first things I would do is eliminate the requirement that the Deputy Attorney General needs to be a lawyer. There's absolutely no need for that to be done. He needs to have access to legal advice, which obviously he would have. But in terms of restructuring the system, you don't have to be a lawyer to do that. In fact, I think it would be better not to have a legal background in order to do it. And there was a time in Saskatchewan, I know, that it was a legal requirement for the Deputy Minister of Health to be a doctor. And you don't have to know how to do an operation on a liver in order to be the Deputy Minister of Health. And you don't have to know about legal precedent in some legal case to be the Deputy Minister of the Attorney General's Department. So that would be the first change I would make. Let me just give you an example of something that I saw. That one of the best systems I ever saw was in Lesotho. Now this goes back about 30 years ago. I went out to a village to see the chief, and he was busy. He was holding court. So apparently what had happened is 3 young boys had gotten into some woman's garden and trashed it. This had happened the day before, and so they were holding court in the village. The chief and the 2 headmen were sitting on a chair, and everybody else was sitting on the ground. The woman who had the garden was able to explain what had happened. Each of the 3 boys was given a chance to speak their piece, and anybody else in the village who had an opinion was free to make a comment. Now, there are no legal books that the chief looked at. He heard everybody, and as it turned out, the boys were blaming each other for the problem, which gave him quite a chuckle. But after everybody had said their piece, he and the 2 chief headmen conferred for 2 or 3 minutes, and then they rendered their decision, which was that the 3 boys had to haul water and firewood for the woman for the next month, or whatever the time period was, as restitution for destroying her garden. And that was the conclusion of it. They had made no reference to legal books. They were the recognized authority figure in the community, and they rendered their decision. And I don't think there's any way you could improve on that system. Much better system. It was quick. The parties that were affected had justice delivered within 24 hours. Anybody in the village who had an opinion was free to make a comment, and they got on with the rest of their lives. And the cost was minimal. It took no time at all. Probably the whole procedure was less than half an hour. And I really don't think there's any way you could improve on that. The only potential problem is that the chief and the headman could be open for bribes if somebody had sufficient resources. And that's something that I think would have to be taken into account. But other than that, I think this was a perfect system. And I think there would be ways, and I won't get into that in this video, but I think there are some ways that we could find in BC to implement a program somewhat similar to that. Another thing I think that's not very good is the fact that when you get a speeding ticket, everybody pays more or less the same amount. There may be a range in appropriate fines to be levied, but it's a relatively narrow one. And I would say if you get a traffic ticket, it should be based on your previous year's salary. So if you made $20,000, let's say it's 1%, the penalty is 1% of your previous year's income, you would pay a $200 fine. And if you made $100,000 the year previously, you'd pay a $1,000 fine. So it's 1% of your previous year's income. Now, some people might feel that it's inappropriate to have to declare your income publicly, and I can understand some concern in that regard. So maybe there have to be ranges. There could be things could be done to avoid the necessity to specify exactly what one's income is, but in some way it should be based on ability to pay. Because let's say the fine is $200. That's a significant amount for somebody who makes $20,000 a year. But for somebody who makes $100,000 or $200,000 or $300,000 a year, that kind of a fine is of no consequence at all. So I think that's an inappropriate thing. Now, there's a number of other things. I won't take the time in this video to go into those, but if we could streamline the justice system by putting in an administrator who wasn't beholden to all of the legal people in the province and make some real changes in administration, I think there's no end of things that could be done. I won't get into the police situation. I'll get into that later, because there's lots and lots of issues there that need to be resolved. But if we could have some one-off things like I've mentioned, taking a page out of the Lesotho example, I think we can make some real changes.